Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. I have a very special guest for you today. Bruce Pryor is the former co-creator of the HeartMath Institute. He's the founder of Renaissance Human, and he spent nearly 3 decades teaching at Stanford. But he's also appeared in over 800 performances of Les Miserables. He's a published author and a photographer. He sings, he dances, and let's face it, he has likely out-embodied most of us before breakfast. Bruce brings science, art, and soul into one human experience. And today we're going to talk about everything from coherence and burnout to reinvention, vitality, and the power of living from the heart. Bruce, it is a joy to be in your energy field.
Wow, Abby. Can you, every time I need to be introduced anywhere, would you please be available? Before I get started, everybody, I have someone to introduce me here because she just says everything so well. So thank you for that. Wow.
You're welcome. You know, it's funny. Yesterday was my birthday, and my kids did one of those AI songs.
Oh.
And oh my God, and I was crying and everything. And I thought, like I need to listen to this on repeat. Like every time I have a mom guilt moment or, whatever, like it's just, it's always, so sure, I will record that and you can just hit play whenever you want someone else to read it.
You actually need to come with me. Actually, physically be there at
even better. I would love to go where you go. You go amazing places. That sounds fabulous.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah.
Yes. Great. Let's talk about all the amazing places you go. I mean, tell us about, let's just start by, and I got to tell you this. It's so funny. Last night we went to see Mission Impossible. And I had a dream about this interview, and we couldn't finish it. We could not get it done. We were falling into water. Things were happening and I woke up and I was like, oh my God, that was Mission Impossible. Like I literally direct the whole thing. It's not going to let you know.
This is a CGI. I'm not actually I'm actually hanging from the wing of an airplane right now. I wanted to make it look normal, but actually every now and then I'm going whoa, it's going to kind of go like that here and there. But
exactly. Perfect. So tell us about your journey from, Showbiz to HeartMath to where, what the heck? How did that all happen?
Well, I was born into 2 very creative people. My parents, who were highly creative. My mother, more of an artist, visual artist. My father, more of a singer, also landscaper, at least of our home. And they were, and my father's voice was beautiful, and he was wished he had been able to be an opera singer. I didn't think I had any of that. I didn't think I had any of the creativity of either of them. Actually, I just kind of was a regular guy. I was a good student, and played kind of the boring sports, basketball, baseball, and football. But nothing stood out particularly. And then suddenly in senior year in high school, discovered I could sing and was given the lead role in the High School Musical. 2 years later, the show was actually The Fantastics. I entered the show called The Fantastics, and my career was off and running. And it was like, how did I get here? I was not a theater kid. I did not ever want to be on stage. I was not a singer as a kid. I played trumpets. I was musical since a young age. But anyway, all that happened. It was kind of whirlwind, and suddenly I was literally in New York, living in New York City at 19, with the lead role in the longest running musical in the world. And I was like, wow, how did this happen? 2 years ago, I was co-president of the student body in Milburn, New Jersey. Like how did this get here? How did I get here? And after several years, even though I loved it and was a very good singer, good dancer, and all this stuff, I found my heart pulling me elsewhere. And my girlfriend, who was a very successful actress in her own right in New York, in musical theater and TV and films and all kinds of things, we both were feeling this yearning to go elsewhere with our life, that the path was not just to be on stage. The path was to help people in between the nights they can actually get to the theater.
Wow.
You know what I mean? If you know what I mean. I would have these visions of, in this show, I was very close to the audience. The actors were all very close. We could see people very clearly, the reactions on their face. We could see that, it's probably the mom's birthday because they brought the 2 kids, and there's the dad. He looks kind of like an accountant. Mom, maybe a stay-at-home mom, maybe a school teacher. Who knows? You'd go through these little imagining about people, right? But then I think, I wonder, is this feeling they're having right now, which is love and joy, and it's humorous, and there's also gravitas. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely show. And I think, is it going to last when Monday 9 a.m. rolls around and they're back at the hard frustrating job or school that they hate, will they remember any of this? And I mean, I wasn't trying to belittle what we were doing, and yet the reality was, was this really helping, or was it just kind of a momentary? So the deeper part of me that wanted to really help people and really inspire people and grow was getting stronger and stronger. But I was only 25. Like, well, what do I know? So it was like, okay, go west, young man. And so we literally moved from New York City to a redwood forest in the Bay Area of California, and began working with a group, a couple of different groups. One was a publishing company, later got involved in nutrition, and eventually, about 12 years after arriving in California, HeartMath started. And I'd already met the founder 10 years earlier. And by that point, 12 years after I had left the world of entertainment to be in business, but to be in more health and wellness oriented business. I was asked to be one of the founders and leaders of HeartMath as it was starting in 1990. And I had no idea where it would go, but I loved the vision. I loved the fact that we were going to create very simple tools that people could use in the heat of a moment. But the key thing was, because that idea was invented in California. California is the home of many organizations that had been doing that for decades. But we were going to do it based on solid, rigorous scientific research, not just somebody's theory, somebody's method that they've been practicing in retreats in Northern California. So that was my little cynical thought. The world needs something that's grounded in science, not just something that's a lovely philosophy, but doesn't stand the test of real stress. And so that's the journey of HeartMath began. And while I was not in the research group per se, I was always intrigued by it and wanted to really be able to explain it well, because what I was ending up doing was speaking to groups of CEOs. I joined the faculty of Stanford Business School in 1997. While I was still full-time at HeartMath, but I was now teaching at Stanford Business School. I was working with huge companies, Motorola, Shell, BP, Unilever, J&J, NASA, all kinds of things, bringing these HeartMath ideas and grounded techniques and strong science to pretty impressive places. And all of that was going on, and HeartMath was growing and building, and for years, and it continues to. Now it's been 35. That number doesn't make any sense, but it's true. 35 years since HeartMath began.
And for anybody, sorry to interject, but for anybody who's listening here right now and just is like, I have no idea what HeartMath is, just give us the thumbnail real quick.
Of course. Well, so HeartMath is the name of an institute, and it's the name of a system developed by that institute. So the system is three things. It's a set of practical techniques that can be used before, during, or after stressful moments. And all three are important. If you could prevent a stress by being smart beforehand, great. If you find yourself suddenly in a conflict or a very heavy situation, do it then. If you forget, both options are gone. Now at least you can recover quicker. Do it then. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I love the fact that these were tools that could be used before, during, or after. So that's number one, very practical. Number two is this grounded scientific research that now totals more than 400 peer-reviewed studies on the efficacy of the HeartMath techniques in every conceivable situation, from test anxiety with kids to people with chronic congestive heart failure, to veterans coming back from any war with PTSD, to, you name it. There have been, wherever the mind-body connection matters to health, which is everywhere. Right. Then if you learn how to control some of the fundamental issues of your body and your mind and emotions, almost anything could potentially improve. So the research was kind of the second pillar of HeartMath, and the third is technology. So one of the key things we learned was that moment by moment, how our heart is beating changes. It beats in smooth rhythms when we're feeling happy, when we're in the zone, when we're in the flow, when we're on the beach, when we're walking in the mountains, when we're loving a project that we're doing, like you're in that creative flow with something and you look at your work, oh my God, it's been 3 hours. Wow. Because you just kind of got lost in the flow of it all. So we had figured out in the early 90s that when you're in a positive state of flow or just happiness, joy, your heart starts beating in this very smooth pattern, like very predictable and very healthy for the heart. It's not fighting at all. And we'd also learned that any human, when we're feeling any kind of stress, thinking about something we're going to have to do that's causing stress, having had something happen and you can't unhear what that person said to you, and
Yep.
it keeps on playing. All of these things cause the opposite effect in the heart. The heart beats almost like an earthquake when we have any kind of stressful feeling. So that visual of an earthquake kind of pattern when we're feeling frustrated or upset or angry versus this beautiful coherent wave when we're feeling joyful or compassionate or peaceful, that was HeartMath that figured that out. Why that matters? We can change it. We can go from the frustration to the joy, and it's not that difficult. It
Yeah.
takes practice, but you can learn how to do it quickly. Then you got to practice. And the more you practice, the better you get at, like anything.
Right.
I've practiced English. So at this point in my life, I'm pretty good at English.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Cause we talk about it a lot, but there's always new listeners and stuff. And if someone's listening, I
Yeah.
always get frustrated when I'm listening to something and I'm like, well, what is that? What are they talking about?
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely. I appreciate
yeah.
it.
And it's so fascinating to me that you, at such a young age, you had this, when you were telling that story, it's like at this young age, you're thinking, that's what you're thinking about. Like, are these people taking this joy outside of the theater? And
Yeah.
that's just fascinating because I think not a lot of young people, we all have our individual things, that call to us or drop into our mind that then sort of navigate the trajectory of our lives. But it's fascinating to me that you're on stage singing and dancing, and what you're thinking about is, are people taking this joy with them? Like, is this mattering?
Thank you for acknowledging that. Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is I was in the show a long time, and it did end up being about 800 performances, and that's a lot of freaking performances. It was 8 nights a week, 8 shows a week, so that's basically about 100 weeks. So when you do something that long,
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't just on autopilot. I wasn't just saying the lines like I was a clone or something, but I also wasn't worried about saying the lines. It was like so natural because I'd done it so many times. So I could kind of feel myself, be myself, which
Yeah.
means observing what's going on around you, not just being kind of caught up in your own little world. And I would just be genuinely fascinated. Like, what this looks like a family. What's the story here? And
Yeah.
every now and then you'd see the mom and dad and a teenage daughter, and then you'd meet them afterwards. They'd come up ask for an autograph, and you'd find out that the husband and wife had met on a date coming to that show. And
Oh,
20 years later or 15 years later, they're bringing the 12-year-old daughter with them to the show where they met. I mean, stories like that
wow.
would happen. So I'd be standing there, observing this audience, and most of them were tourists coming in from out of town. The Fantastics was a classic show to come see in New York. And so they weren't necessarily New Yorkers. A lot of them were out of towners. And I just kind of try to imagine, based on how they're dressing, Kansas or or
Right.
whatever. Oh, very LA. Okay, we got an
Yeah.
LA crowd tonight. Whatever. But you just kind of, I did projected that. But the second thing that's deeper and deeper response is that I grew up in the 50s and 60s. And why I say that is that when I was a teenager at 14, I was marching against the war in Vietnam because I
Mm,
had two brothers who were conscientious objectors who both hoped they would not have to serve. They were against war. And
mm.
there was a lot of us in that generation. I mean, when I went to that march, there was like 250,000 people marching against the war.
Wow.
And that was part of the 60s, which was a time of massive cultural change. We
Yeah.
didn't even have African Americans and people of color were not even allowed to vote officially till 1964,
Right.
same decade.
Yeah.
Two of my brothers ended up in Vietnam. In 1968, two brothers were wounded. The two that were there both were wounded.
Wow.
It was the same year Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh,
Death was very close.
yeah.
And when you're a sensitive person, and by the way, my parents were pacifists. And so during the Second World War, they concluded that we will end up annihilating the human race as long as we continue to believe that war can be a solution. We will
Mm,
end up killing ourselves. It's inevitable.
yeah.
And so they had taken this ethical stance in the Second World War against war. So I was raised by people who
Yeah.
were against war and pro social justice, pro civil rights at a time when that was just exploding, let alone the cultural transformation of rock music and the Beatles and Motown and just all of it. So for me, it was like, of course I would be thinking that way. It didn't seem like, oh, wow, I'm really mature or really evolved. Like a lot of my peers and friends would have also been, is this going to lead to anything? There was a lot of anti-business attitudes in my generation,
Yes.
kind of against the corporations. The corporations are going to ruin us.
Yeah.
It's laughable to say that it's been 50 some years since I had those thoughts. Here we are.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting because, what you're saying is that like death was very much in your face in your younger, more formative years. And we talk a lot, I had a Toltec shaman on this show. And,
Oh,
I think a lot about, and what I learned was that Toltec shamanism, really one of the things that they talk about a lot is, or at least this one is talking about how understanding death and getting comfortable with death and the way that we live like we're never going to die, meaning we're not thinking or talking about important things. We're getting stressed out over the little things as though we're going to be here forever and we don't have this really short period of time. And to your point, when you grow up like that, I imagine like in a formative time, you have like this deeper sense. You don't have that luxury of just kind of flying through life, and maybe you create meaning, or have an urge to create meaning for yourself and others, at a deeper level
yeah.
as a result. And heart math, our experience of our life is the only thing we have, right? We experience our life in here, inside our minds and our hearts. And so it makes sense to me that
Yeah.
now it makes sense to me.
And especially at that age, because, I was 14 going on 15 when we got a letter from my brother, who was the second of the brothers to go to Vietnam. And he was a pacifist, but they didn't approve him.
Mm,
They didn't believe him because there were plenty of guys in
sure.
that generation who just didn't want to fight, period. And so they kind of claimed that. My brother was absolutely sincere, but they still didn't. He had a break in his education, so he lost his student deferment. Anyway, blah blah. But just to talk about how radically different life is. So we got a letter from him weeks after he had been wounded. So we had no idea when it happened. It was
Wow.
weeks. And then it was weeks before we would hear again. There was no way to contact him in the military hospital in Da Nang, Vietnam, where he first was. Luckily, it was a wild story. He was a medic. He had been pre-med at Rutgers, lost his student deferment due to an accident. He had to drop out of school for a semester, or just have to take a pause. That meant he was going to get drafted. They said, you'll be a radiologist. You'll be away from the battlefield. Well, so much for that idea. He was a medic on a helicopter evacuation team
I,
during the worst battle of the entire war, the Tet Offensive, when he was shot by a sniper. He was literally hoisting a
oh,
wounded soldier up into the helicopter when my brother was shot.
oh my
And
God.
he survived. And if he had to be shot by a sniper, being in a helicopter, a
Sure.
medevac was
Yeah.
the best place to
Yes,
be.
indeed.
So
Right.
the captain immediately pulled off, and they took him to a hospital, and then they transferred him to a place in Japan. But all that was going on, but we were in the dark completely for weeks. We had no
Yeah.
idea what was going on. And then we get
Yeah.
a letter. Well, that I had a bad staph infection, almost lost a leg. What?
Yeah.
But we weren't
Sure.
in the midst of any of that. So it was just all the unknown of what was
Right.
going on at a time when we also, about a year later, a beloved uncle passed away suddenly from heart disease. And there was I felt kind of literally stalked by death for a while.
Wow.
And I was at 14, 15, and not like someone's trying to kill me, but it's just like, it felt like death was everywhere. And of course, there was a lot of young Americans dying in
Yeah.
where in Vietnam. Why are our guys, it was
Right.
just all that was going on, let alone, as I said, culture saying free, be love, be peace, be unity
Right.
and all that. So it was a very, very rich and full and frightening in many ways time, right?
Yeah. And it's making me think because I know that later in life, you and I talked before that you had your own medical issues and you talked about how you moved through them in a way that surprised physicians and whatnot. And you attribute that to your heart math training and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to share something about
Sure.
that as well?
Sure. Yeah, so back in 2009, I'd had some symptoms that were uncomfortable, and I kept thinking, "Oh, it can't be anything that serious." Typical guy reaction. And then suddenly, I'm getting a lot of blood, and suddenly I really have to go to the doctor, and they finally check and discover a tumor in my bladder. And I didn't know at the time, but you don't get benign tumors in your bladder. If you got a tumor growing there, it's cancer. So we knew it was cancer. Luckily, the surgery worked, got the tumor out. It had not spread at all. So I am coming up on 16 years cancer free. But I didn't know that in 2009, that in 2025, I'd be interviewed about
Right.
what happened after in the treatments that they put me on, because luckily, because they got the tumor out, they didn't have to do something extreme like chemo or radiation, but they had me on immunotherapy, and something about how the treatments were done started giving me staph infections. And so I had a series of staph infections. I never felt sick from the staph. It was just, it would show up in my blood, and they'd say, "Oh, we can't do the therapy today because you got a staph infection." Okay, how did I get the staph infection again? Oh, here in the office or at the hospital. Okay, I'm feeling really good, really positive about this situation. Luckily, I can laugh about it all. I can see the dark side or the humor side of it all. But at the time, it got worse. It spread to my blood. Your listeners who know such things, that's a life-threatening condition. So
Yeah.
that's a go to the hospital now. You could
Yeah.
stroke. And obviously I didn't stroke, so I'm now 15 plus years staph infection free. But I spent a few days in the hospital for 6 weeks. I had to infuse a strong antibiotic, infuse as in drip from a bag into my arm, 6 hours a day, three
Oh
hours in
my
the morning,
God.
3 hours at night. That's a lifestyle changer, trust me. And again, I could be kind of lighthearted about it. And eventually the staph infection issue kind of moved to the background, but my hips were getting worse. Hips that had been diagnosed as arthritic several years earlier. And then my mother passed away a few months later. And then I realized the hips weren't getting any better. They were continuing to get worse.
Yeah.
I went ahead and had double hip replacement surgery, not at the same time, but 3 months apart. So, and my marriage was ending, and I was having serious questions about staying as CEO, because I was CEO of HeartMath this entire time I'm describing, of all this health stuff. My
Did you
mother,
practice? How did you manage like your inner world? That's a lot to have going on.
uh, yes. So imagine, so by that point, 2009, HeartMath was 18 years old. So I had been practicing and teaching already. I've already done thousands of presentations, including one-on-one coaching, including workshops, keynotes, for that long. So it was automatic to me to go through my heart. And in fact, after the cancer surgery, I was in the recovery room, and they kept not releasing me because they kept saying your breathing is too slow. And I say, you don't understand. I teach a slowing down breath. It's called heart coherent breathing. And this is normal for me. I know it may not be your normal patient. They kept saying, well, whatever, he's delusional. They just kept leaving me there. And I found like 4 hours later, they said, it's not changing. You must be right. I said, yeah, I am right. I know what. So why I share that, though, is, other than this funny story, is that I was so practiced in the heart math approach of breathe through the heart that it was automatic for me. I mean,
Yeah.
when I went for hip surgery a couple years later, the doctor came to me and said, I don't know what your pain threshold is like, and everybody's different, but my average patient has lost 20 to 30% of the cartilage in the hip. So that much missing means bone on bone. There's
Yeah.
significant
Pain.
pain. He said, you have lost between 70 and 80%.
Wow.
And he said, I don't know how you're dealing with the pain. And I'm like, I don't know either, because I have nothing to compare it to. But I did realize, in fact, I shared this with a friend of mine who had been teaching heart math for years, who went through a shoulder replacement. And we both were kind of commiserating, like, thanks to heart math, we were able to deal with the pain a whole lot better than we would have otherwise. On the other hand, thanks to heart math, we probably both delayed getting the surgery because we could tolerate it more than other people could. So
Sure.
thank God for the training. So during that time where there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, waiting for the next procedure, waiting for the next test, waiting for the diagnosis, um, recovering from a procedure, recovering from a surgery, whatever it was. There was a lot of downtime. There was a lot of prone time. I was lying down a lot.
Mm.
And the good news was I'm a self-reflective person. I mean, in my early 20s, I'm reflecting on the lives of audience members. I mean, like,
Right.
and it already was a meditator, already was a yoga practitioner, already was a raw foods vegetarian back when there was such a thing. And so the reflection was kind of automatic for me. And so there was a lot of focus on what do I need to do to be healing. And I would get positive feedback often, like I'd come out of a surgery and somebody'd see me back at the office, for example, and I'd get comments like, "Wow, you're looking so much better than I thought you would." And my reaction was, "How bad did you think I was going to look?"
Right.
Because I'm not exactly chipper. I just had freaking bladder cancer
Yeah.
surgery. I mean, this is not a walk in the park. But I get that comment often enough. And you referred to something earlier when I had the first hip replacement and went to the doctor for a checkup about a month later, and I was told to walk unsupported, no crutch, no walker, walk 25 yards and come back while the doctor watched, and he's laughing while I'm walking. I'm like, why is he laughing? This does not feel good. That my doctor is laughing at me while I'm trying to prove that I can walk pretty well. And I get back to him. I reached and I said, what's so funny? And he said, we were just he and his PA, who had been in the surgery and was a wonderful, incredible person as well, they were wishing all of their patients could recover as quickly as
Mm.
I was. So I was getting this feedback that you're doing
Yeah.
really well. You're doing really
Yeah.
well. And I would reflect and I think, well, this resilience stuff is real. You practice these heart coherence practices enough, and when you don't need them, and resilience is built. It literally is
Yeah.
built. So you can still. It doesn't mean you're not going to ever have something go wrong in your health, as I am proof of, as are many other people. But it also means your resilience can bring you back so much quicker. So I kind of
Yeah.
kept seeing that happen. Like, wow, I could be feeling way worse right now, and thank you, and would motivate me to spend more time outside enjoying nature, spend more time reflecting and putting heart and being grateful for anything I could be grateful for, even when things felt dark or worrying. And I have a humorous personality, as you're noticing, so I can feel lighthearted about a lot of things, and
Yeah. You mentioned how there's all these companies you worked with, right? And lots of stress
yeah,
and people under stress and not facing life threatening situations, but their brains and bodies are definitely in the nervous system state of an emergency. And it feels like an
exactly,
emergency. And
exactly.
and these are the folks that you spent decades working with to try and help them regulate to the point that that you're talking about. What are some of
Exactly.
the challenges that you see there, and how do you help people with that? Because there are people listening who are like, my hair's on fire, and it's just something happening at the office, let alone all of those challenges.
Yeah, and to your point, today I think it's in my lifetime, it's the period of highest uncertainty that I've ever experienced by far. I mean, it seems like life was never as certain as we wanted it to be. It was always
Mhm.
more uncertain than we wanted to believe. But now
Mhm.
it's just like uncertain on steroids. Like, is there anything that we can count on? And of course, partly it's the current political situation, but it's just life in general. I mean, for all those that are certain that the climate change is not a problem, okay, well then why are these massive glaciers melting? Okay, if you don't think
Right.
it's actually getting warmer, or it's all
Right.
just unrelated to humanity, we still got to deal with the fact that stuff is changing, and in some cases worse than the climate scientists had predicted. So, and that's just one example of a thing that is so uncertain, and therefore, how
Right.
can we can on and how can we feel secure or stable internally? So, to me, there's huge opportunities for people, but it's hard, and I think. I wrote a book a number of years ago called From Chaos to Coherence, and it's a book about heart math and the applications in companies. And one of the chapters was called "Growing Up in the Hudson River." And the analogy in this chapter was I grew up in New Jersey, not too far from the Hudson River, at a time in the 50s and early 60s when the Hudson River was not a healthy river. I mean, there was
Yeah.
just all kinds of pollution being dumped into it upstream, and garbage, and just it was a mess. And like you didn't want to go, and you didn't want to, like the Hudson River, you don't ever fall into that you might like literally incinerate or something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty horrible. Work began finally in the late 60s and 70s, thanks to people like Pete Seeger and others, that we've got to revitalize this. This is a lifeline. This is water. It can't be sewage, but
Yeah.
at the time it was. And so I had this kind of wild fantasy of, what if you were a fish that grew up in the Hudson River, and your environment was full of oil and garbage and shoes and tires and toxic chemicals. That's what your conception of water would be.
Yeah.
So in my little fantasy, let's say you were that fish and you want you want a dream vacation to Lake Tahoe, and you're flown out in a protective aquarium out to Lake Tahoe for your dream vacation, and you're dropped in Lake Tahoe, and you're like, well, what is this? I don't know what this is. This does not feel familiar.
Yep.
This can't be water. I know what water is, and there's all these things you have to avoid, and it makes my skin flake off. This is not water. So I'm using that analogy because a lot of us are in environments and in ways of thinking in our company or in our family or just in ourselves that is like the fish in the Hudson River. We can't really imagine it could be much different. It seems like
Yeah.
the external is so daunting and so out of our control. How could we ever get over or
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
beyond or
Yeah.
not be just feeling completely beaten down by the externals? And I think that's the challenge. And yet I think on the other hand, there's more awareness of the potential of things like mindfulness, of having more holistic approach to life in general. I mean, I think one of the more interesting bits of research is all this stuff around blue zones and longevity, and where
Yeah.
consistently one of the messages is it's about social connection.
Yeah.
Social connection. So that means, so who's in charge of that again?
Right. We
Oh,
are.
that would be me. So
Yeah.
you're really going to stay doing the Wordle an extra hour when you could be having fun? I don't know why I picked on Wordle. I've never even done one, but I guess a lot of people do. But so anyway, that's our choice.
Yeah.
And you look at communities and ethnicities who stay healthy. Great study done back in the 60s of the town of Roseto in Pennsylvania. They had a terrible diet from the standards of what's considered healthy. But this population, it was mostly Italian families, and they were generation after generation after generation had grown up and always stayed. And because of the degree of social connection, they had very low rates of heart disease, in spite of
Mm.
this terrible diet, supposedly
Right. Right.
high
Right.
in the
Right.
wrong kind of fats and way too much carbohydrates and everything else. As life sped up and that social fabric started to fracture a little bit, and kids moved away, there wasn't the same level of social connection.
Yeah.
So now there was loneliness. Now there was isolation. Now that diet was going to really be harmful to them because there was not that
Right.
connection to others. And that, I
Right.
think, is part of why I continue, even 35 years after we started, to be so enthusiastic about the promise of heart coherence and heart brain coherence, is that I can control. No one is controlling the rhythm of my heart. No one is controlling my breath. Yes, I
Yeah.
can feel like a victim of all kinds of things. Join the club. It's called Being Human in 2025. But I have choice every moment. I got 20,000 breaths every day. Now,
Yeah.
granted, a third of them I'm asleep. I don't have much control over those. But the other two thirds, who's telling me when to breathe and how? No one. Oh, so you mean I could actually breathe through my heart? Because there's evidence saying when you do that, it slows down the heart rate patterns, the heart rate variability, as we call it. It creates that smoother wave. That wave is now transmitted to all the cells in your body. Your body is saying, thank you. Thank you
Right.
for being more peaceful right now. Thank you for being more loving and more kind right now. That other guy that you are sometimes, you make us work pretty hard. You really do.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we really have right now. I mean, that it's so difficult because there's so much going on, and I think we've been conditioned. I mean, people who don't know anything about heart math or don't, just are we are conditioned by our times and the way that we grow up and what's happening. And we think that our environment is going to determine, our outer world's going to determine our inner world, period. That's just how,
Right.
I guess, I always describe it like, oh, it's like, well, I guess I'm dealing with this today then. I woke up feeling like crap. I guess this is how it's going to go today,
Yeah.
and we don't know. And that's why, a big piece of this podcast and my passion, I really see it as my charitable contribution, is having folks like you on and talking about myself as well, just about, the control and power that we have within ourselves, and also how we've lost touch with our intuition, like that deeper knowing,
Yeah.
that knowing that you had on stage, that like, there's more to this. There's more. Not only is there more to this, but like moving toward that is what's going to light me on fire. Like that was you knew that, and you just kind of followed that. And we have so much cognitive offloading now. Like it's just whatever is around us or whatever the noise is around us, we get swayed into that. And then our nervous system tells us that to do anything but panic. Well, first of all, that to panic about that is actually doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And to not panic about it is sticking your head in the ground or something.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think that's an issue.
Well, and I'm glad you call this podcast, this show, the Intuition Incubator. I love that phrase actually, because in my experience, and this goes back to your question, how do you deal with when it's kind of one crazy, life-threatening, not just crazy, but
Yeah.
I heard the word life-threatening a few too many times, and how do you deal with all that? And I think part of the challenge and part of what I was very inspired by some of the HeartMath research years ago about intuition, and what my experience has been is that the more I can continue to come back to stillness, come back to my heart. Some of my best nights of sleep are when I have awakened at 3 a.m., but I'm feeling in a deep sense of peace, and I'll just kind of stay awake,
Yeah.
just feeling that deep peacefulness. And there's breath going, but I'm not breathing much. It's just kind of like, it almost feels like a quiet sea where there is some movement. It's not completely still, but the movement is so gentle, and it's just like radiating peace. And I feel that, not every night, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel that. And the more I can get into a state that's really quiet, the more the intuition, which is there trying to guide us, but we
Right.
often can't hear it because there's another voice going on. That's the head, or emotions that are out of control a little bit. That's blocking our ability to hear that intuition. I think a lot of people kind of get that. They're aware of decisions they took that were ignoring an intuition, and they'll
Mm.
realize, oh man, I knew that was going to happen, and then they kick
Yeah.
themselves. But the real thing is, don't bother to kick yourself. That's adding insult to injury. That's not who's helping. Who's that helping? But
Right.
be aware that your intuition is this source of intelligence. And of course, HeartMath is saying it's all related to the heart. When the heart is more in sync and more in these coherent waves, it allows every intelligent aspect of your body to be more available, because you're not
Yeah.
in the same frenetic. And when I say it like that, I don't want people to picture it like it's literally you have to be like shaking for you not to have clear intuition. You can be appearing to be very quiet, but just internally have the mind running a zillion miles a minute, and so it's drowning out that other intelligence that is in you. But the good news, again, in my experience, was the more I would quiet in the midst of whatever I just gone through or about to go through, and just try to be as still as I could and be as grateful as I could, or loving as I could, or peaceful as I could, that opens the door to more intuition to
Yeah.
tell you, hey, you know what? This is going to be okay. I mean, I had an example, I may have told you this, after the surgery for the cancer, and it felt, okay, big win. The doctor was right. It was not, it was slow growing. It was only a stage 1. It could have been 2, 3, or 4. It was only
Yep.
1. That's really good news. And my body was feeling like, yeah, that this was the big thing. Getting rid of that was the big thing. And
Yeah.
I'll still do all the other things, but this was the big thing. So I could kind of rest in that. And so I was waiting for this big test to find out is my intuition right, or am I kidding myself, right? But the
Yeah.
doctor was also feeling like this is looking good. This is what I was hoping we would find. We're in good shape. So all of this was kind of giving me confidence. Waiting for the call from the doctor to give the results of the big test
Right.
a month later, and feeling positive. And then the call comes through, and sure enough, he's like, right off the bat, Bruce, great news. Test came back negative. But I felt this like, oh, huge weight. And what was wild about that was I didn't think I had that much. I thought
Yeah.
I was really fine.
Yeah.
And yet there it was when I got the news that was what I really didn't hear in the 3D reality. There's no cancer. You're fine. Oh, wow.
What do you make of that? I mean, it's a really interesting point, right? Like we think we're in good shape, but then something happens and you realize, like, wow, I've been carrying a lot of tension that I had no idea I was carrying, or a lot of fear.
Yeah, well, I think it's the both. I mean, my intuition was correct. I was
Yeah.
right, and I was trying to trust that, but there was this whole other part of me that had just gone through the last few months of
Yeah.
everything, of all these ever more extreme symptoms, and then surgery and intense surgery and it's extremely painful surgery, and the aftermath is not fun on any level, guys listening. I always say I took one for the team, because damn, guys do not want to go through that surgery. I mean, no
Yeah.
way, no one, when a woman going through something similar wouldn't either. I'm not making it
Yeah.
special about guys, but guys can relate to what I'm saying. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's both. We are a living complexity and living contradiction inside us. We can have all this intelligence that was correct, but I didn't. I mean, one way to look at it is I didn't fully surrender to that. But why would I? I've never been through this before. I had no evidence to say this intuition is correct. How would I possibly
Right.
know that? It felt
Right.
right, but you don't know
Yeah.
until you get the data. Oh, thank God it was right. Oh, thank God. It could have gone another way.
One thing I kind of sense about you, it sounds like, and I know we talk about this a lot in HeartMath as well, but it doesn't, it sounds like you, and I don't know if you've trained yourself to be this way or it's kind of naturally how you are, but you, it seems like you don't do a lot of self judging and beating yourself up about the different personality parts that might be not what you'd like them to be. I imagine you don't show up perfectly in every moment of your life. That would
What?
be very difficult. So I'm imagining that if that's the case, it would seem that what you do very well is like self-forgiveness. Like, I'm human. Am I right in that? Is my intuition right in pegging you that way?
Yes, yes. I think because actually I am a perfectionist on the inside. I always wanted to excel. I always wanted to do really, really well for everything. And as I had the conscious awareness a little more than 35 years ago that I was here in this body at this time in this life for the path of love, for the path of the heart, that I was a man of the heart. That's why I'm here.
Mm,
That I had really no idea what I was saying when I uttered those words. I didn't know what that would mean. I had the strong sense, this intuition. This is
yeah.
this is why you're here, dude. And not because I was only going to do heart math either, but it's more like you're here to understand the heart, express the heart, help others find their heart. That's your purpose. But that didn't, and so if I feel like I'm not doing that, I can be hard on myself, absolutely. But then I've
Mm,
learned enough to identify and let go of what I'm hanging on to. I'm disappointed in myself, let's say, or
yeah.
I did have an expectation. I could have done better in that situation. I didn't have to react in that way, even though they were being ridiculous, even though they betrayed me, whatever the excuses
Right.
could have
Yeah.
been to justify. But I do really try to let go of the self judgment and to surrender to forgive myself, surrender to there's a higher power, surrender to God, ask for forgiveness sometimes when I feel like I've really lost my way, not for like weeks at a time, but in
Right.
regard to a certain situation or a certain type of situation where I feel like I could have been doing better, I really could have. And so to have
And
the humility to be able to accept that and and to kind of be relieved by the ability to accept that too, instead of kind of fighting it up. Oh, no, 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 I can't be that. I can't be that. I can't be that. Well, you were.
You were that, right? You were a schmuck. That's what happened. Yeah, right. So what is the importance of that? What is the importance of that ability to not prolong that incoherent state of judging yourself? Like, it's bad enough to have the moment where you weren't in the world in the way that you wish that you were in the world, and to have those personality parts come up, however they do, But what's the importance of then learning not to fall into a well of guilt and shame and self-loathing over it all?
But it sounds appealing, what you just described.
It does to
Not at
do
all.
that.
Not at all.
Yeah, it doesn't.
No. Well, I guess it comes down to what's our belief in life, and I tend to have a very I'm double, like so many of us. I mean, I tend to have a very optimistic view of why humans are here. We are I believe we are here to grow. We are here to learn.
Mm,
We are here to experience life in as many ways as we can. What that invariably means is a lot of life lessons, some of which are through tragedy, some of which are through guilt, some of which are through shame, all kinds of things that can create growth and create understanding. I guess what I'm really trying to say is that accepting that we are imperfect, and that it's not about being perfect, it's about
mm,
growing. And so for me, after I went through all of that, those 2 years of the emotional suffering was actually harder than the physical. As much as the
mm.
surgeries themselves and some of the treatments were quite painful, the decision to step down as CEO of HeartMath was one of the hardest decisions of my life. And
Wow.
because I was so completely and utterly identified with it. I mean, it was 24/7 for me for 20 years,
Yeah.
and traveled 100,000 miles a year, even when I was having all those surgeries.
Wow. Yeah.
I think back and how did I do that? How did I physically fly that
Do
many miles
that.
when I would, for weeks at a time, sometimes I couldn't go anywhere? Like, how did I actually pull that off? Not that I want to ever
Mm.
do that again, but I guess my point is that along the way, I've realized that we as humans, I do believe we have a positive future that is possible for us. And I believe the studies around the quantum universe, and that ultimately we live in a world of possibility. We don't
Yeah.
believe that. We don't believe
Right.
growing up. We believe there's one, our parents tell there's one possibility. This is how you're supposed to be, Abby. And this is
Right.
what the family does, Abby. It's not like, well, Abby, actually there's an unlimited quantum waves of possibility. That's not what mom and dad told you or told me.
No.
And luckily, I'm saying that to my daughter, and she's all agog about it. But I guess I just feel like it's about growth. And for me, when I was able to step away from the responsibility of being CEO, my marriage was also ending at this time. I sometimes forget to throw that little one in. Like people will say, "Did you do? Is this like an inverted bucket list? You need to get done, like all the worst things that could happen to you." And or did you look at some list of top 10 stressors? Oh, let's do that this year.
Right.
So all that happened, but I guess I have this view that we live in a benign universe.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah. That's big.
benign indifference of the universe. I think it's more than indifference. I think it's in our favor, but it's quite a journey to really get in sync with the universe enough to feel like that's a reality, because it's so easy to feel back in victim mode, and civilization, society tends to. I mean, we're living in America right now in an incredible. You will be the victim. There are victims everywhere. You are the victim. You are the victim. You are the victim. It's like,
Right.
wow, that's really feeding that insecurity of not just Americans, but humanity. So again, I think we have this incredible power to continue to evolve and to grow, and that came back really alive in me as I exited and started to heal, and started to experiment, and started to sing again, and started to dance
Mm,
again. And little by
mm,
little, I was doing things that I really loved, and I had the time to do them.
yeah.
And I, at one point, I remember saying, I want to be a student again. I feel like I've had to be the teacher or the manager or the leader for so long. I want to just go to a workshop. I want to go to Esalen. I'd never gone to Esalen. uh, I want to have a voice teacher. I want to go to a dance class. I want to learn. I want to be a kid
Yeah.
again. I want to. And then I started to realize that should be all of us all the time, but we don't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm at an age you don't keep learning at your age. You should be retired. Like, people are like, why are you not retired? Because I love what I do. I'm so sorry, but I love what I do, and
Right.
it's so fulfilling. Why would I retire when I get to do things that I love?
Yeah.
I didn't choose a dead end job just to earn enough to retire. I kind of flipped it the other way. I was like, I'm going to live now as best I can and as lovingly as I can, and I don't have the same financial security that my father would have had at my age. On the other hand, I think I've already contributed to a lot of lives, and I plan to do a lot more. So
Well, and wealth is there's so many wealths, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's such a crucial viewpoint that you're talking about is this idea, this belief system that you have that the world is, the universe is benevolent and it's on our side. That when you hold that, it just changes the picture. Doesn't mean you don't get discouraged or annoyed or hurt or sad or bummed out, or fearful, but it makes a tremendous difference in the experience of the overall life. So
Exactly.
you've lived many lives. What are you learning now that you never expected to be your next lesson?
Wow. How I can be this handsome at this age.
That was gonna be my next question.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I got out of sequence. Um, wow, that's a great question. Well, it's funny. It is actually kind of related to age in a way. I'm doing things I never could have imagined I would be doing at my age. I mean, I'm dancing at a level. I'm not quite as fit as when I was in my 20s, but I'm freer as a dancer than when I was in my 20s. I can move
Ah,
between styles, and I have a certain flexibility in my approach that I feel people comment all the time, like, wow, you are so connected when you dance. And I'm like, I know. I've never been quite like as connected in my movement. And
wow.
I'm 71. Like, it's happened in the last year or two. So it's
Wow.
like all kinds of and that was never something I aspired to or imagined would be a lesson. But I've had enough things that I've had to deal with physically over the last 15 years that, like, when I moved back to the Bay Area about 6, 7 months ago, I hadn't been dancing much at all when I was living on the East Coast for 7 years. And so I was kind of out of the flow of it. My body had lost some of that flexibility. I was strong, but I didn't have the flexibility to, like, as you see the way I'm moving around now.
Yeah.
As a
Right,
dancer,
right.
I love the fluidity of being a dancer. As I started to get it back, and I realized I have complete confidence I will be able to get completely back to where I was and
Mm,
more, because I've
hmm.
seen that happen now several times. A lot of people my age don't have that experience. They didn't,
Yeah,
people cannot believe when they watch me walk, let alone dance, that I have two titanium hips. Like,
right.
what? No, there's no way you're that fluid with metal. And and I'm saying, I know, I could not have imagined this either, but it's
Yeah.
happened. And now I know a lot more about how the body works. So now it's like, okay, you had 4 hours of sleep last night, which literally happened last night. Um, you will bounce back fine. You'll need a good long nap, but you'll be fine. You have proven to yourself over and over again, as opposed to many of us as we age. Is it's feeling a little, that thing today. Oh my god, I better stay in bed all day. You just sort of give in.
Yeah.
You just give into it, not feeling like you could get over it. Not
Well,
feeling
and
like,
not only as you age, but like I think when people have a bad night's sleep, we
sure,
tend to wake up and are like, ugh, this day's gonna suck. I'm gonna be
exactly,
tired. And it's so funny if you practice with like just telling your body that you got a full night's sleep and you think thoughts like, well, what would a person do who got a full night's sleep? How would I be acting right now if I just slept so well? And I find myself just like the chipperest person. I'm like, well, I'd be jumping in the shower and I'd be doing my workout, and it's a whole different thing, right?
yeah, 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 beautiful.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and like talk to us about like what is the Renaissance human, and I know you're doing something big with the Shift Network, and what has all of this evolved into? Like, are you melding all of this tremendous singing and dancing and intuitive movement and heart math and corporate experience together?
Yes. Exactly what's happening. So I've had a career that a lot of people hear the story of, like, actor when I was 19 and teaching at Stanford on leadership. Like,
Yeah.
how do those two fit together? But the whole story is kind of like, wow, you've been kind of all over the place. You're like the ultimate dilettante or something. And I was thinking, no, trust me, it will get more obvious as life goes on. I'm oblivious to this process too, but but yeah, the creativity stuff. So in the aftermath of all the health stuff is when I felt this impulse to sing again. I reached out to this dear friend of mine who I'd been roommates in college with, and we started singing and we started performing together. He also suggested that I try this improv form of dance, thinking that I might love it. And initially I was like, you're crazy, man. I just had both hips replaced. What are you suggesting? 2 hours of nonstop dance? Like, which part of hip replacement did you miss?
Right. Right.
And anyway, he was right. I was wrong. It has saved my life. It has enriched me. It's kept me young in ways I never could have imagined. I dance at least a few hours a week, if not multiple hours a week, always, because it's like it's me. It's part of what
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be doing, not for an audience. It's just I need to do it because when I'm dancing to music that I love, or even music that I don't know that I just find cool, I am another guy. A whole part of me emerges. Same is true with singing, and same is true with being out in nature and taking hikes. So so all of this kind of has blended together into a course that I've created for the Shift Network, which has as its foundation heart coherence. Because to me, even though I have kind of moved on and continue, I don't work at HeartMath. I haven't since 2011, formally. I continue to grow and continue to find that the more we are heart coherent, and the more there's a kind of a mindset of coherence now we approach life, the more things can unfold, even in wild, unexpected ways. Like, I never, ever imagined I would be singing again, let alone dancing again.
Yeah.
And all that has happened. And I released an album of original songs 7 years ago. And like, what? I didn't even want to write a song ever. And now I've got an album of my own songs. I can sing anywhere as long as I've got my iPhone and a Bluetooth set of speakers. I can sing with my band.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so stuff like that. So I've kind of blended all this together of the awakening of creativity, which happened for me, and it was a renaissance. And people started telling me after I'd gone through the life-threatening things, and now I was singing again and dancing again, and my people are impressed by my photography. So in other words, you're like a Renaissance man, dude. You're like, all these creative things are emerging. We didn't even know you could do these things. And you dodged a couple of life-threatening bullets. So you're a Renaissance man. So I kept hearing that. And I was pondering that a lot. And I thought, well, I don't really want to be a label, but maybe there's something universal in this story. And I kept kind of pondering, and the term Renaissance human occurred to me one day. I thought, ooh, that's not a term. I looked it up. Nobody was really using that term. I thought, oh, I get to define it as I want. And so it literally means we all, as humans, get to keep giving birth throughout our life to new talents, old talents. I got to rebirth singing and dancing. I never imagined I would do that. And it happened. And it's continuing to happen. I'm sure I will learn new skills. I'm not done learning. Every day I'm trying to learn something.
Yeah.
We are all born with the power to create life. It's in our DNA. And that is not just to do with having a child or being part of the child making process. It has to do with the urge to create, the urge to contribute, the urge to try something new, to be playful. We all have that. So I call Renaissance human, meaning all of us. We all have the power to not only create another life, but to recreate our own. We have the energy. It's what we're made of. We don't necessarily believe it because our parents did not encourage us to be creative, let's say. Or we felt we were when we were young, but now, well, I'm in my 60s now and I kind of lost the juice. Well, so did I, dude. So did I. I mean, imagine how I felt with all that I went through. Did you feel like I just jumped up out of bed every day? Well, number one, I couldn't, literally, quite a few days. There was no jumping, period.
Right.
So anyway, it's just, to me, that's a lot of what I've kind of come to is that this Renaissance human idea is that we all get to give birth throughout our life. It doesn't stop. And science tells us 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds are still creating new brain cells. So if we're staying awake, staying creative, staying interested, staying playful, life continues to be delightful. People always
Yeah.
say to me, you do not act your age. I say, if I ever act my age, we have a problem.
Right.
Because I don't intend to. I love the expression. The goal of life is to die young, as late as possible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What I hear you talking about through all of that is, when you talk about dancing and stuff, it's like you're so rooted in self, whatever
Yeah,
that is for you, like in your joy. And I always quote, I can never say it enough. Howard Thurman, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is more people who come alive.
exactly.
And it's exactly what you're saying. And what you're talking about is like, I see the intersection so well, right? Because you get heart coherence, so you regulate the nervous system. At that point, you will automatically begin to hear and sense and understand where I call it your soul signal, where your
Mm,
soul is really yearning to go. And then you just start to move intuitively, into that place. And then the more you do that, the more joy you're in, the more it's a beautiful thing. And so this is the
exactly.
course that you've created and that you're going to be teaching in the Shift Network.
Yes, it is. And the third piece. So there's the heart coherence as a foundation. Then there's the kind of exploration of our own individual creative energy. There's a process
Love
that I've
that.
developed. Originally, Stanford commissioned me to create a course about creativity for well-being. But then the third piece that to me is the most foundational and the most important today in these times is this idea that, and I call it vibrato. It's this idea that every day, multiple times a day, we need to let go. Things are accumulating. We see alerts on our phone. We hear about something that's happened in the Ukraine, in Russia, in Boulder, Colorado, wherever, and we're
Right.
shocked and we're in fear and we're worried and
Yeah.
we're angry, whatever we're going through. And if we don't do something, if we just keep storing all that stuff, that's as much of why we're tired and confused and bewildered and feeling helpless as any. We're not processing that stuff and letting it go. So the me that I could become is held back by all
Yeah.
these things that I'm not resolving of my own. That doesn't mean ignoring the realities of life. That doesn't mean spiritually bypassing and saying,
Right.
oh, I'm above all this. You have to see from a bigger perspective. Humanity's going through this process. Yes, it is. And there are millions of people that are suffering. And the people that I've admired my whole life spoke out for those who are suffering. And I will do
Yeah.
that. I'm not gonna just say, oh, there's a bigger picture. Yes, there
Right.
is. And I don't have the biggest picture. I'm humble enough to acknowledge that, and I am going to speak out, and I'm going to send love where it's needed in the world. I'm not going to put my head in the ground. But at the same time, I know I've got to take care of myself. I've got to rejuvenate myself every day. I've got to do things that I love. I've got to be grateful for all the good things that I do have, all the wonderful people that I get to meet, like you, and the way that this is even how we even met, thanks to
Right.
Emily, and how Emily and I even met, which was on the dance floor, thanks to my
Right.
buddy who said you got to try this five rhythms thing. I met Emily in one of those sessions 10, 12 years ago. So you just
Right.
never know how life could play out. And so that's the fun we get to have. But you got to get rid of all the things that can cloud the perception, block the intuition, to that
Yeah.
point again. And
And even to what you were saying, it's like when you were talking about like accepting, like, yeah, you're going to do things. This isn't about like, and I love it when people bring up spiritual bypassing, because we talk about that a lot here, because it's not like spiritual bypassing happens in the mind. It doesn't happen in the heart, right? It's like something we tell ourselves. Everything is just great and it's okay and it's wonderful. And meanwhile, the body is having all of these emotions and it knows it's a bunch of bullshit, right? But what you're talking about is you have to feed yourself, and the science backs it, right? Like when we have an emotion and we don't release it through HeartMath or some other way, the body's still holding that emotion. And we know there's an energetic force around us, thanks to HeartMath and others, that's 3 feet around us. So isn't just rejuvenating yourself and doing those things, isn't that actually doing something for the
yeah,
people who are suffering? that act in and of itself is doing something for the people who are suffering, much more than just watching the news and complaining about it and forming a group, to complain about it once a week together.
Exactly. And just to touch on this vibrato and why I even call it that is I was walking on the beach in Florida when Hurricane Milton, which was a Category 5 hurricane, was steamrolling towards Central Florida, and I had evacuated a couple hundred miles north to be out of harm's way. And why I felt I should do that is that I had been diagnosed 2 days earlier with kidney stones and urinary UTI. So my body is in agony. There's a Category 5 hurricane coming to the town where I was living in Orlando.
Again, you like to do things in multiples.
I have a fear for the theatrical.
Yeah. Clearly.
So why not? So I'm in this wild contradiction of I'm literally at urgent care and I've just gotten the diagnosis and I'm saying, okay, whatever about that. I've been through worse. In that part of my anatomy, I've actually been through worse.
Right.
So this is like not that big a deal. What about the hurricane? I'm literally asking the nurse, are you staying? Are you leaving? What are you doing? And I'm like asking everybody I could because they said, okay, I have a choice of which way I'm going to go. Meaning death. Neither are particularly appealing. Die by hurricane or die by kidney stone. But either way, I got options here. So what's the better option? So I ended up evacuating. So I thought it'd be absolute craziness, actual hell, if I stayed in a house with no power while all hell was breaking loose outside while dealing with kidney stones. Like that would be, I might literally like incinerate or something right on the spot.
Yeah.
So I evacuated and I'm getting on the beach after the hurricane's gone, and it's kind of calming down in the whole area. The whole state of Florida was kind of turbulent there for a while, but I'm in pain. I'm on strong painkillers. I'm on antibiotics, all kinds of stuff, trying to deal with the situation. I'm literally walking on the beach, asking the ocean. I mean, I have a deep relationship with nature, and thanks to cancer, and thanks to having to have my arm attached to a bag for 3 hours twice a day for 6 weeks.
Right.
You got to get creative. Oh. I'd have to figure out how I could walk outside and sit on the deck and enjoy some nature while I'm doing that instead of just pissing and moaning while I'm sitting inside and being, feeling sorry for myself. So I have that deep connection with nature, and I'm walking outside, like, talk to me, nature, ocean, wave, give me something. It was despair is what I was feeling. And part of it was for myself. Part of it was feeling the strain of the 5 million people who had evacuated because of the massive hurricane. Part of it was the world. This was 3 weeks before the U.S. election also.
Yeah.
It was like, wave after wave after wave. Oh, my God.
Right.
And I was feeling waves of pain, waves of agony, waves of grief, waves of worry, but then on the beach, it was like, wow, but it's beautiful too. There's all this foam flying off the waves, and it's all like light, this cotton candy. And so the ocean said to me, in a sentence that was very clear in my heart, generate waves, don't just feel waves. And that was profound for me because I'm probably considered an empath. I don't use that label, but probably people would say, "Oh yeah, definitely, you are.
Yeah.
You're like way too sensitive, to things." But being very sensitive, I feel waves of all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so, but I also can get stuck. I can get stuck just feeling like, how are we going to deal with this gigantic issue? How is this going to resolve? And feel helpless, feel whatever. And so that message, generate waves, don't just feel waves. I know from all my work with HeartMath that you can just be swimming around. At some point, you got to stop, hit the pause button, breathe through the heart, try to see a new way, put out some gratitude. So this was kind of another version of HeartMath in a way, but kind of real simple. Generate waves, don't just feel waves. And I pondered that a lot. And I thought, I'm not doing that enough. I need to let go of the wave that I'm feeling. And then I need to put out more love to people that are suffering, or gratitude to people that need to know that I care about them, whatever. And that was fed me to realize, God, I know so much about waves. I mean, HeartMath, for 35 years, we've been studying the waves of the heart. I'm a dancer, the waves of music.
Right.
I'm a musician. I mean, waves. And so walking on the beach, I thought, I've got to get out to the world soon with some teachings around this, a course around this,
Yeah.
and I could do this, and I was, and a lot was kind of coming together, and it was like, yeah, I got to do, and don't wait. You could wait 6 months, have the perfect
Right.
program and the mastermind and the whole thing. No, no, no. You need to. And so two
Do it
days
now.
after the election, I taught my first vibrato course, which was all about waves, mastering waves. And there's a key
Wow.
technique which vibrato is kind of the core of this program you were asking about on the Shift Network. The course is called Healing with Heart, the Vibrato
Mm.
Method. So
Mm.
vibrato picks up kind of where HeartMath, it's very connected, but it's especially about a simple way throughout a day to release energy as it accumulates inside of us. Negative energy, stressful energy, worries, feeling overwhelmed,
Mm.
feeling just lost, feeling just like clouded with uncertainty and kind of paralyzed, all those things. There's a way to let that go and let the imagery of waves even help you. Like imagine you're
Yeah.
standing on the beach when like I'll use the example. You're planning that beach vacation and you've been planning it for a while and it's been really cold winter and you're finally getting there and you packed, the bags are unloaded and you're at the resort and you walk out on the beach that first time on the beach. That feeling, and
Yeah.
it's warm and the breeze and the waves. And so in this thing that I teach called the wave of relief, that's part of the vibrato, part of the Shift Network course, you imagine the air coming in like it's a warm breeze in the tropics. It's
Mm.
breathing that in, that kind of energy,
Mhm.
and then you're letting it go like a sigh of relief. Like when I got the news, the test was negative. My
Right.
whole body did a sigh of relief. Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing you can do. So in this, the wave of relief, you're just letting it go out to the sea. Because I'm saying to
Yeah.
people, the waves of the sea go both ways. Waves come
Right.
in, but they also go out, or we'd all be
Wow.
underwater. So
Yep.
when you let the air out, when you let the feeling out, imagine the wave of the ocean taking it away. So you're kind of
Yeah.
in that visualization, but you're doing it with your breath, and you're doing it and doing it, and that being fundamental. Let clear our system out, reset our system as many times as you may need before a meeting, before a phone call. You feel that tension in your gut or in your shoulders, wherever you're feeling it, and just do that, breathing in like a warm wave of the ocean, and then letting it out back to the ocean. Do that a few times. Think, okay, I feel better. I'm a little more positive now.
Yeah.
So that's
I
part
love
of this
that.
course.
Yeah.
It's kind of, to me, a very important next step is you're doing this, that we need to do this regularly
Multiple
throughout a
times a
day
day.
sometimes.
Yes.
And then
Yeah. And
and
easy.
then
It's
be putting
doable.
out more gratitude, then be putting out more kindness, more compassion. And that's part of the
Mm.
course too, is doing that through movement, through meditations, and so movement is a big part of this course actually, because I believe, especially thanks to COVID, a lot of us are still way too sedentary.
Yeah.
We can now do amazing shows thanks to our computers and sit,
Right. And sit.
in an L
Sit
shape
and
for an hour and a half, and then
yep.
and go to the next L shape in front of the computer screen for an hour and a half, and then the next L shape. I mean, we're not moving.
Yeah. No,
We're moving
not at all.
with the laptop.
Right. The camera.
That's what we're moving.
Exactly.
We're not actually moving.
And
And
of our
so
movement.
these are all the reasons why we need more tools now.
Yeah.
We need more reminders. We need more. There's more on us, and
Yeah.
so that's the spirit of what I'm doing now, and the spirit of this course, the shift course.
So I love it. We'll have all of that in the show notes for people to sign up. That kicks off July 10th.
That's right.
And we'll have links for people to check that out and sign up for it. I think it's going to be amazing, and to learn all these accessible tools that are really doable. It's not like you don't take an hour out of your day and meditate, or it's really like you can do it throughout the day pretty
Exactly.
easily. And it sounds like it's going to be great to help people spark creativity and all of those things as well. So before we end, I always ask people if there was one thing that you wanted people to know, like if you could just like shake people and just say, I just need you to understand this one thing. What is that?
There's a phrase I've used for a long time now that I think is actually very profound. most people will agree with it when they hear it, but if you really ponder it, it's really profound. And that is the statement: love is never wasted. And
Mm.
I truly believe that, especially at times when you know there's a disaster happening somewhere, there's been a hurricane, there's been a mass killing, there's been a plague, there's been a pandemic, whatever there's been, sending love to a situation, you could say to yourself, well, is it doing anything? Well, the alternative is, as we know from physics and from biology, is to feel bad, to feel angry, to feel afraid, to feel fearful. You are definitely damaging yourself to experience all those feelings.
Yeah.
So for the cynics who say, well, will the person that's causing the problem be impacted by your love? I believe
Right.
they will on some level, not consciously, but
Yeah.
they will be facing some thing after they have gone from this life. I believe there will be lessons that they will need to continue to learn if they have acted in a cruel and evil way, whoever that may be, myself
Yeah.
included. And so anytime I'm sending love, I'm doing it for the soul of that person, not just for their
Yeah.
recognition. Like, oh, that guy in California has just sent me love. Like, no, they're never going to know that.
Right.
But for me, sending love is in tune with who I am, who I feel I am as a man. But it
Yeah.
also is the best energy I could put through my system at a time of shock or horror or grief. So love is never wasted. It's, to me, that's not an idealistic sentence,
Mm.
because
That is
when you
so
put out
good.
love instead of all the alternatives, all of which are justifiable and may need to also be expressed in some ways. I'm not saying you don't ever express the horror or the shock. Like I said earlier, I'm speaking up in ways because my heroes did their lives.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela and I were born on the same birthday. When I found out we had the same birthday, July 18th, I thought, whoa, I better get serious. I share a birthday with one of the giants of human
Yes.
history.
Right.
I saw his cell in Robben Island off the coast of South Africa. I walked
Wow.
where he had walked, and I feel an obligation to speak out for truth and for justice,
Yeah. Yes.
not just to be sitting in my little cave in my little progressive bubble of Marin County, California,
Right.
which is a lovely bubble, by the way. It's really lovely
Yes.
here. I do not object in any way, but I'm not just about retreating to a bubble, but more like every day, what am I contributing? Because the
Yeah.
field of humanity is a thing.
Yes.
That's not just a concept. It's not just a new age concept. It's a reality. I could
Yes.
feel it so vivid. Two times in my life where I thought, wow, I've never before felt the field of human consciousness as dramatically. The first time was right when COVID happened, and I was in New York
Mhm.
City,
Yeah.
literally in Manhattan, as
Yeah.
everything was shutting down. And I was getting on the bus to leave, feeling like I don't know how many more buses. I mean, there would be plenty of buses, but it was almost like,
Sure.
get out now because it's
Yeah.
coming for us. And there was a sense of doom. And then I
Yeah.
remember waking up in the mornings for a while and kind of looking out. And of course, nobody was driving because you had nowhere to go. There was no work,
Right.
hardly anybody, not very few. But there was this grayness everywhere. And
Yeah.
there was no actual physical grayness, but
Yeah.
there was
Right.
an energy of, oh
Yeah.
my freaking God, what is happening?
What's going
And it
on?
felt like
Yeah.
that at the time of that hurricane.
Yeah.
Similar. 5
Yeah.
million people had evacuated and it was coming.
Right.
And it's like, okay, the human field is real.
It's real.
You can see it.
No, I felt it. I felt it on the day after the election. I went for a walk and it was just a bizarre thing.
Exactly.
It was just this feeling of like the collective, like, wow, people are really in uncertainty right now. I can feel, and it wasn't mine. Like, you know, the difference, right? When you're feeling your own uncertainty and you're stuck to it versus kind of when you're feeling the collectives,
Exactly.
you know, and it's, to your point, it's a real thing. Thank you for bringing that up. I love that. I'm going to write that down because I don't think I could possibly remember it enough. Love is never wasted, right? Even in a moment of frustration or irritation with, you know, family members or whatever, you know, where your ego wants to respond or wants to say or do something, love is never wasted. Like what would be the harm in, you know, that's beautiful. Well, Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate having been introduced and our connection and our conversation and today's conversation. I can't thank you enough.
Well, it's been a delight, Abby. This is really, it's fun interacting with you. It's fun being on a show about intuition and the heart and coherence, and it's rare. I mean, you are probably the most educated host I've ever had relative to heart coherence. That's a big compliment. I mean, I get asked all the time. I
Thank
mean,
you.
it's
Yeah.
not. I can't think of a single podcast in years where that hasn't been the main topic, or at least in the top three. So it's like I'm always getting asked about it. It's too much of my life. It's a
You're
it's a
right.
huge chunk of my career. But rarely is somebody as educated about it and using it and teaching it. So it's fun because you can understand a lot more than the average host would, let's say.
Yeah, it's just, I'm super passionate about it, and that's what I hope for this podcast, that we're touching people that are coming into it at the very beginning, but also people that have been on the journey for a long time. And some of them have slid into spiritual numbing, or some of us are just on the next, our next iteration of ourselves. And how do we continue to evolve and learn together? So, thank you. I appreciate your saying that, and I look forward to chatting again.